All right, now that we've solved inequalities and regular equations, we're going to solve quadratic equations. So quadratic equation in x is an equation that can be written in the general form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers with a not being 0. So there are several methods. We call these solutions roots is the big thing. So if they say they want the roots, they just want the answer. So method one, the easiest way, and usually on the homework it'll tell you on the Hux assignment, and even on the homework it tells you what method to use. So the first one's factoring. So what you do is I'm going to list the factors of 91. 2 doesn't work, so 3 doesn't work. 4 doesn't work. 5 doesn't work. 6 doesn't work. 91 divided by 7, that one works. 7 and 13. Now I wanted to add to that 20 in the middle, so that's my answer. So I'm going to say x plus 7, x plus 13 equals 0. But remember, you've got to set each individual part equal to 0 and solve it. So I'm going to get x is negative 13, x is negative 7. All right. Sometimes they'll give you a factoring problem, but you just got to move everything over to one side. So I'm going to add this 36 to the other side. I'm going to get x squared minus 13y plus 36 equals 0. So factors of 36, I multiply 36, but add it to negative 13. Well, if you think about it, it's got to be double negative. There's your answer right there. So factors into x minus 4, x minus 9 equals 0. Don't forget you want to set it equals 0, so my answer is actually going to be x equals 4, x equals 9. Right? You are going to see a problem like C. Remember, sometimes in factoring, you don't always have to do multiply the last number, add it to the middle. Sometimes you just got to do GCF. So like this one, 7y, I get y minus 1 equals 0. So I'm going to set 7y equal to 0 and y minus 1 equals 0. So y could be 1 or y can be 0. All right, so sometimes you got to do the GCF instead of the traditional factoring, or sometimes you'll see a perfect or a difference of squares. So like this one, you get 12y minus 3, 12y plus 3 equal to 0. I'm going to set them equal to 0 and solve them. So just so you know, it's going to be plus or minus 1/4, because if I solve the other one, I'm going to get negative 1/4. Okay. And that's how you do the factoring for the quadratic equations and solving. Sometimes you're going to have to use complex numbers. So don't forget, right? If it's a negative on the inside, I'm still trying to make pairs. So I could do 2 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 3. So that's a pair of 3s, a pair of 2s. So I would take 2 times 3, which would be 6. But the negative is an I, so my answer to this would be 6i. Same way here, I can make pairs, 2 and 12, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. Right, so it's going to be 2i square root of 6. Because that 6 is what's left over, 2 times 3. So don't forget, we've been doing that before, but sometimes you have to write plus or minus. So whenever we do the quadratic formula, that's what you're going to see. The other way to solve it is the square root property. So don't forget, if you square root something, it means plus or minus that number. So your goal here is to get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to add 81. And again, it'll say on the homework, square root property. So I get x squared equals 81. But now I got to square root it to get rid of the exponent. So it's plus or minus 9. This one's a little bit harder. So you want to get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to subtract 50. I'm going to get 2x squared equals negative 50. Divide by 2. X squared equals negative 25. Square root it. Right, it's plus or minus 5i, right? Because I can still take a negative number, but now it's got to be I. Lastly, you'll see something like this. You can So again, if you're going to solve this, you want to isolate the x squared. So this first one, I want to get rid of this negative 2 that's on the outside. So on C, I want to get rid of negative 2. So I'm at 2x minus 5 squared equals 16. Now the whole point of doing this is because now I can square root it. So I get 2x minus 5 equals plus or minus 4. So I'm going to add 5. 2x equals 5 plus or minus 4 divided by 2. X equals 5 plus or minus 4 divided by 2. And again, you're going to be able to solve this. So I would do 5 plus 4, which would be 9 over 2, or 5 minus 4, which would be 1 over 2. And they're going to want both answers, so you're actually going to have to completely solve it. So if you have a number, not an imaginary number, you can actually solve them. Right? So this one's a little bit harder because I subtract the 6, but then you get I squared to 6, plus or minus. So I'm going to add 5. So I'd write my answer as x equals 5 plus or minus I squared to 6. That one I can't actually add or subtract because it's got an imaginary unit in there, and that's okay. You're just going to leave it like that. All right, so now we've done the square root property and factoring property. The last one is going to be the quadratic formula. I'm sure you've heard this before, but you can also sing it. X equals negative b plus or minus a square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I hope you'll play that on repeat. It's a great song. All jokes aside, though, that is the formula. You have to have that memorized. So what you want to do is you want to make sure it's in the form of x equals negative b, or ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I need to subtract this 22.75 to the other side, and now I have my a is 1, my b is negative 3, my c is negative 22.75. And you just plug it into the formula and you'd solve. So I would say positive 3 plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So then we're going to simplify. So I get 3 plus or minus, that's going to be 9. Plus, you get that 91 whenever you take 4 times 22.75. So this ends up being the square root of 100 on the inside divided by 2. So it's 3 plus or minus 10 over 2. So it's either going to be 13 over 2 or negative 7 over 2. All right, because I do 3 plus 10 divided by 2, 3 minus 10 divided by 2 to get my two answers. Same way over here, you got to move everything to one side. I always like to keep my a positive. Set it equal to 0, so my a is 4, my b is 1, my c is 4. Plug it into the formula. Negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared minus 4 times 4 times 4 all over 2 times 4. So you get negative 1 plus or minus 1 minus 64 all over 8. Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 63 all over 8. Negative 63, break it down looking for pairs, right? So I could do 7 and 9, 3 and 3. That's a pair. So you're going to get negative 1 plus or minus 3i square root of 7 all over 8. If you can't simplify any further, that's what you would type in. That is your answer. So if you have an imaginary unit, normally you can't simplify any further. But be careful, you might be able to divide by the 8. This one you can't, just to make sure it is simplified completely. And that is how you solve quadratic equations using those three methods. All right. So the more you practice, the easier it gets. There is a paper assignment. I tell you which method to use, but it's nice to practice it and check it. Okay. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, that is it.